Called to order. Good morning. Oh, thank you. This meeting is called to order. Good morning and welcome to the November 8th meeting of the Douglas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. My name is Pam Weegan. I'm the chair of the CJCC. I want to pass along a little information regarding how we will conduct our meeting on Zoom today. We ask that all members please turn on video if you haven't. We ask that all members and presenters mute their line when not speaking. We ask that you please identify yourself each time you speak. If you have public comment to make during the public comment section of the agenda, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Recordings of the CJCC meetings are available on the CJCC website after each meeting. Our first agenda item will be a presentation about the Lawrence Police Department's accreditation process with Chief Lockhart and an update from Chief Mosley on the KU process. Go ahead, Dr.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Good to see all of you. We, as a department, have begun an accreditation process. We are going to become dually accredited through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, more commonly known as CALEA. CALEA is an international organization that outlines 160 plus standards that all departments have to meet to become accredited. It's a 3-year process. And we have not yet signed our contract. We just received a grant. That's what we were waiting on to sign. That will help cover some of our first-year expenses. The great thing about CALEA is it has at the end an on-site assessment, and you'll get subject matter experts from all over the country who will be coming to Lawrence to conduct an on-site assessment. And part of that assessment is a community component. So they will be visiting with community leaders like yourselves and community members to assess how well we are meeting our commitment to those specific standards that relate to our community. They look at all your policies. All of your policies have to be in line with the accreditation process. And then not only do you have to have applicable policies in place, you have to have proofs for all of your policies. So we have a policy that says XYZ. We have to be able to show that through a police report, through a patrol video, through some type of concrete evidence that we followed policy XYZ, and then attach that into the system. One of the other really neat things that we'll have available as part of this process, all of our policies and proofs are maintained in a system called Power DMS. It's a policy acknowledgement system that's used in a lot of different industries, but most specifically for our purposes with CALEA and CALEA accrediting agencies. But part of that is a public-facing policy portion, and we are going to be subscribing to that. So what that means is all of our policies will now be available individually on our website through this public-facing option, eliminating the need for us to every 6 months create this giant PDF that we put on our website with all of our updated policies. So, for example, last spring when we banned no-knock search warrants and chokeholds, a lot of folks were calling me the next day saying, "Hey, your policies don't reflect that," and I had to remind them that we only update that PDF twice a year. So this will be a way when we update a policy and put it into Power DMS, it will immediately go out to our public-facing option, and then our community members can download the updated policy and see the changes that were made. The other thing that we are doing is we are going to participate in, as a beta agency, in the Kansas Law Enforcement Accrediting Process, or CLEAP. And Chief Mosley, I know, is going to do more details on that. I'm just going to speak about how we decided to pursue dual accreditation. We were contacted by the folks at CLEAP to be a beta agency, and this was during our discussions about becoming a CALEA accredited agency. CLEAP is designed to be a statewide accreditation that is going to be geared for any agency in the state of Kansas, but really toward those smaller agencies that can't afford the CALEA process. The director and the person spearheading this at KLETC is a former CALEA accreditation manager, and she is creating this system that really looks a lot like the CALEA process and making it available to our agencies here. So we were honored to be part of a beta test with that group. We initially sat down, and my initial direction to my accreditation team was pick one. And so as we went around the table, everybody was kind of making their case for one or the other. And I got to my accreditation manager, who was last, and she asked me why we were only picking one, and made a really good case for doing both. And since she was the one doing all the work, I gave in and said, we're going to do both. And so we're really proud to be able to say we're going to do both. CLEAP is a 2-year process, CLIA is a 3. And so we're actually in really good shape, and I think ahead of the curve with the CLIA process. So I think our goal is to try and finish early with CLIA and get it done within 2 years. It's a very ambitious goal, but it's a goal that my team set for themselves. So we'll see how that plays out, and be happy to answer any questions you might have about that. Thank you.
Chief Mosley, did you want to do an update?
Yes, just like Rich outlined for CLEAP and CLIA, we've committed to, although I haven't signed the agreement yet, we have a lot of work to do to get to that point, but we're going to go through the CLEAP state accreditation process. I was also contacted to also be a test agency and be involved in the early process for this as well. But in looking at all the standards, what CLEAP allows is for smaller agencies a more affordable option to CLIA. So I'm not going to have the luxury of, like Rich Lockhart, to do dual path, but we are going to make sure we're accredited through the state and do it through that. That's more reasonable on price wise. Like Rich outlined, there's a number of reasons why to do this, standards in law enforcement across the board. But what they do is give you 2 years basically to get everything in order. And then the state sends assessors in to be able to determine whether or not you get that star, that you are an accredited agency at that point. So I haven't quite got to the point of signing an agreement for the KU Police Department. We're still in the process of assessing where we're at. When I got here about a year ago, one of the things I wanted to do was update our policies in making sure they were current as well. We're halfway through that. I could sign up and be involved, but at the end of the 2 years, I have to make sure it's in where it needs to be. We're also going through a reorganization process. When I got here, arrived at KU, we had a chancellor's task force that also is a report I have to do to the chancellor, making sure we're current as far as for the university and our partners, working with them. There was a number of things outlined that KU, they wanted to see, 21st century policing, all the things that any police department should be doing anyway. So we're working on that. I also did a visioning process for KU to make sure that we also listen to our employees. What do they want to see? And then the last piece is partnering with our community. So I'm going through a reorg. We're looking at our policies. And I'm still at the point we're a smaller agency. Who's going to be my accreditation manager? Who's going to be the one that actually tracks and makes sure we get all this done? So while we're doing that, they call that an assessment process. And that's where we're at right now. We're assessing where we're at. I'm committed. We're going to do this. But what I want to do is clean up some of the early things that should be before we go all in. Because once I sign that contract, I'm under the clock then of 2 years within to get everything done that we need to. So I think it's a good thing. We've committed to do that as well. I wish I had the luxury of Rich and had a grant money and for CLIA, but CLIA CLIA alone, in my book, before I came here, I was at another small agency. Small agencies just can't afford CLIA. It's just not even within, and the competing interest of other things you have to do within your community. At least CLEAP, the state accreditation process, is more affordable and gives us that option that we do have state standards that we're all following and we're abiding by. So we are committed. We're still in the early stages, as I like to say, of this process. But I think within the next month, I will sign us on board as well.
That's great. Does anyone have any questions for the chiefs? Well, you're obviously very good at doing this because nobody has any questions for you. Thank you both. Our next item is an overview of the police department's implicit bias training with Chief Lockhart. Chief.
I promise it's not going to be the Rich Lockhart show, but Katie asked me to share this important work that we did. We held the Fair and Impartial Policing Command community training at LPD. Dr. Lori Friedel from Fair and Impartial Incorporated, who is one of the national experts in the area of implicit bias, led the 2-day session that involved community members and members of the LPD. Included in our group were the mayor, vice mayor, and we even had a student from Free State High School. Dr. Faris Mohammed was there, and I think he's going to have some thoughts here, reflections on the training. It was really a good training. It's really unique in the sense that we're all coming together to look at things. It really helped everyone understand implicit bias and differentiate it from explicit bias. I just want to read you a definition from the training manual. Implicit bias is something everyone has, and the instructor really emphasized that everyone has it. It happens when we link individuals to stereotypes, not necessarily based on animus. So in other words, we see people and we think about them in ways that reinforce stereotypes that we see in our society. It is automatic and can manifest outside of conscious awareness, and that's how it's different from explicit bias. It can impact perceptions and behavior, producing discriminatory behavior. We worked through the Douglas County Traffic and Pedestrian Data Collection Program and LPD's bias-based policing policy, and it was really a very productive discussion, and I think a very lively one. We had someone in the group who we were talking about hiring people with implicit bias, and one of the things I think surprised the group who weren't police is that all of our organizations hire people with implicit bias because we hire human beings. So, you know, it's just one of those things that I think is difficult for people to understand. And so implicit bias doesn't mean that you are racist or that you are treating people in a disparate way. We also went through our bias-based policing policy so folks could understand that better. And one of the things that Lori talked about, and I think is really important for this group, especially as we look at the traffic data, is disparity doesn't mean discrimination. And so just because there's a disparity in traffic stops doesn't mean that there's discrimination or bias-based policing. She really encouraged us to drill down further into that data and not draw conclusions just based on our disparities. And I know from experience that every time this report came out in the state of Missouri, every reporter would report on the disparity index for various communities and tie that to somehow being an indication of bias-based policing. So she cautioned us, and I would pass that along that, you know, let's look at it more holistically. And I think Jack and Janice did a really good job of trying to create some of those further analyses for us so that we understand what it means better. But really a great day and a half seminar. Wish we could have had more community participation because it really was a great way to help all of us understand each other better as human beings, not as police officers, not as members of our community, but working to solve some of these issues that we see in our community all over the place. And Faris, I don't know what your feedback was. He was there for both days as well and sat next to me, so we had a lot of interesting conversation.
Yes, good morning. I will jump in and share some of my experiences with the day and a half or 2-day training. I was appreciative of being present. I really like the sort of structure and model of allowing not just law enforcement officers and sort of command staff officers, but also other city employees, in addition to, more importantly, community members, and allowing them to be able to chime in and share some real world experiences related to their interactions with law enforcement, pulling from real lived experiences and where they feel as if they may have even been discriminated against. So we had lots of conversation, including even conversations surrounding Blue Lives Matter, what the implications there might be. So there was a lot of great content. Dr. Friedel, as Chief Lockhart said, is a renowned national expert in this sort of implicit bias policing kind of a field. So yeah, I think it was a lot of good content. There were some breakout groups, some sessions related there, but some of them were kind of short in nature. There was a lot of content to sort of get through. So there was trying to jam pack as much as possible to leave the city of Lawrence with those tools to kind of put the practice upon after Dr. Friedel leave, of course. So, there was booklets passed out with a lot of materials and things like that to kind of comb through and see how this can have an impact and help to shape police policies moving forward. So I think it was great for not only law enforcement to kind of have a better understanding of implicit bias and what that might mean in a day-to-day sort of practice, but also for community members to kind of have some insight and be present to see, okay, this is the type of trainings that law enforcement officers in our community are going through, and they can provide whatever feedback and critiques that they may have, and what that might mean as far as suggestions moving forward in the future. So I guess that's my feedback.
And I will tell you that every day I am here, I discover what you all mean by being uniquely Lawrence. Dr. Friedel had an experience at our seminar that she's never had before. And one of our seminar participants suggested that we should hire people who are openly biased, and that because we have such a great culture of training, that we would be able to train their explicit bias out of them. And, I expressed my grave concern with hiring a white supremacist, and I don't care how good my culture is, I would not be able to train that out of them, and our DA would not be able to put them on the stand. So it was a really interesting discussion. And again, Dr. Friedel was kind of taken back because she's never had anybody suggest that in a session. So thank you, Pam, for the opportunity to talk about that. A really important topic for us.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, Dr. Mohammed or Chief Lockhart?
I did really quickly. Chief Lockhart, is there, I know it's probably not feasible to always have, to have like Lori or some of her staff from the Institute be able to come and provide this training on an ongoing basis. But I was curious if you all have been able to think about how within Lawrence, y'all might be able to continue this type of training, or what that looks like kind of moving forward.
Yeah, we just did what we call a booster session with all of our officers this last spring in fair and impartial policing. This is training we can bring back. It's I think it ended up costing us just short of $10,000 to put this one on. So it is something that we could bring back if our community has capacity for it, to have folks from the FIP Institute come and do a fair and impartial command and community training for this group. We can bring in like KU and Baldwin and Eudora and whatnot. And when we did it in Warrensburg, we did bring in all the local agencies, because I didn't have enough people to bring on my own, and I couldn't afford it on my own. So we split it 3 ways. So there are opportunities, Katie, to do this in the future. And Dr. Friedel has retired from university teaching. She's a professor emeritus now. So we were really fortunate to get her here, and we might even be able to twist her arm to come back and see if she can't get some more uniquely Lawrence opportunities.
That sounds great. Sounds like some good possibilities there. Any more questions for the chief or Dr. Mohammed? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. I think the chief was selected as the spokesperson for all of law enforcement in Douglas County to talk about the plan for continuation of the law enforcement stop study. So Chief Lockhart, if you could speak to that.
All right. Well, Katie, you can join in here with me as well. And Chief Patrick, please feel free to weigh in. Chief Mosley as well. I really didn't realize this was going to be the Rich Lockhart show, so I apologize. We were meeting, if y'all remember, after the study, there were a number of concerns with data points and collection. And so we've been meeting with Katie, the chiefs, and the sheriff and I to look at ways we can capture more meaningful data. And we've made some suggestions for what we think will improve our data collection going forward. Katie, do you have the new checklist or the new, not checklist. Suzanne's got me thinking checklist, and she's right next to me. So every time I see her, I think checklist. But the new stuff.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, do you want what the big change that had been suggested was so Chief Lockhart from Missouri, I think he's shared several times his experiences in Missouri. It was state mandated, I believe, right, for you all to collect the data, and he had a copy of the Missouri form that that the law enforcement agencies tracked. And we kind of compared notes. For the most part, those forms really overlapped a lot with what our law enforcement initially had been collecting. What the biggest change potentially, I think, from the Missouri form to what the chiefs would like to collect moving forward is that the Missouri form really called out and provided a good opportunity to flesh out the probable cause reasons for a search being initiated. That was one data point that we weren't really able to. I think a lot of the discussions like we had in the community meeting that we had held in discussing that, it was a lot of I think anecdote or kind of guesses around why searches were initiated, what was the probable cause. And so the Missouri form really highlighted, gives officers an opportunity to really detail what was the probable cause for a search. So whether it was like plain view contraband, drug or alcohol odors, paraphernalia, things that were seen that were in sight of an officer when they were searching, when they were interacting with a driver. And then the other suggestions had been to drill down more to just demographics of the driver as far as location. Are they not necessarily vehicle, where the vehicle is registered, but more information about the driver's legal address on their driver's license. Those were, I think, the big changes that the chiefs had suggested, and that would give them an opportunity to, I think, give us an opportunity to provide more meaningful data around those interactions, rather than potentially feeling like we're taking guesses maybe at why a stop was or why a search was initiated potentially.
Yeah, and so kind of like, for example, Missouri, when you have a search initiated, it's a yes or no. And then if yes, you check all that apply to these things. So was it a consent search, incident to arrest, drug dog alert, reasonable suspicion, plain view contraband, other inventory, or drug or alcohol? We didn't capture those data points in our study, so we wanted to capture those, and that way we would get a better idea of where those searches were. And then the other one was related to the reason for the stop. And if it was an investigative stop, then getting some more detail on that. Was it a call for service, detective or crime bulletin, an officer initiated, or other? And then getting some of that resident information. So we added in the zip code of the driver's current residence and whether or not the driver was a resident of your jurisdiction, so that we can get an idea of how many of these stops relate to a transient population. So for example, I've got a lot of college students. My guess is I'm going to have a pretty high transient population, as well as Chief Mosley. Chief Lovett, who has K-10, is probably going to have more transient as well, whereas Chief Patrick and Baldwin may not have as many because he doesn't have as big a highways going through. Those are important for us as we make policy decisions based on the data that we collect in the traffic stops. We did talk about a change where if we are on a traffic violation, right now the current policy is to collect demographic data from everyone in the car, even if we have no contact with them. We felt like that was very intrusive to those who aren't involved in the stop. So if somebody runs a red light, we're going to collect demographic data on the driver, not passengers in the car. One thing that will do for us, one, it won't create a potential point of conflict with someone who's not involved in the stop. And then secondly, it's not going to prolong the stop any more than it needs to be. So that's another change that we're going to do. The other thing is doing analysis on the data every 6 months. We felt like that was an adequate time. For me, it works really well. The concerns of Chief Patrick and Chief Lovett were, they don't have enough stops to do something monthly or quarterly. So they felt like 6 months would be an adequate time for them to do some significant data analysis. And it would be for myself and the sheriff as well. Did I miss anything, Katie? I think that was about, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that covered a lot of that. And one of the other requests that had been or topics that had come up around breaking out the speeding to like traffic tracking
that's right.
reasons for, and this is the I think initially we had under 10 and then 15 or over. And we wanted to add in like a under 10, 10 to 14, and then 15 or over. Those different groups represent things different for, it's one thing 15 miles an hour over the speed limit going through the KU campus, but on K10 or on a road in the unincorporated part of the county for the sheriff, that means a little different things around procedure or practice for the different law enforcement agencies. So we're still kind of working through those. Those were kind of the initial first round suggestions. And I want to I think the kind of the next step will be making sure that we can adequately cross over what the new data kind of collection looks like with how we would be able to certainly making changes, especially adding in the probable cause, that probable cause field. I think that right now that field is mostly text options. And so that we'll need to kind of, Matt and I will work through kind of making sure that we can cross over the kind of what data in 2023 looks like compared to 2022. And I mean, I think for the most part, that was kind of where we're at with that, and working through the MOU with all of the police agencies. We are working through that process now, and Matt is working through kind of testing and validating all of the code. Janice and Jack gave Matt a very large amount of coding and data from their study for him to kind of set him up to be able to continue those analyses. And so he's working his way through validating all of that so that we can start providing the chiefs that information moving forward from where Jack and Janice left off. So.
Do we have any questions about the changes that they're suggesting or the data collection? Shay?
I did. Just Chief Lockhart, what did you say about no longer collecting data of the passengers in the car? I'm not sure I understood that part.
It's only related if it's a traffic violation and the driver is the only one contacted, that's the only person we'll collect demographic data from, not passengers or anyone else in the car. If it's an investigative stop where we're contacting all the people in the car, we'll collect the demographic data from everyone in the car. So if you think about, we call it the contact study, it's only the people that the officer has contact with what we collect the demographic data from.
Why that change? I'm just curious.
Well, a couple of reasons. One, we felt like it's intrusive to contact people in the vehicle who aren't part of the traffic violation. So in other words, if I have 3 people in a car and I've stopped you for running a red light, now I've got to ask everyone in the car for that intrusive demographic information. And then secondly, it prolongs the contact. So now I've got to take extra time to collect the data. Then I've got to take extra time on the back end to input the data for people who we didn't have any contact with on the stop.
I would encourage feedback of this group to this team in this work. So if there are questions about that, like Shay proposed, let's ask them.
And I can tell you in Missouri, they don't collect data on passengers and when it's just a traffic violation. It's only if you have an investigative stop where you're collecting or you're contacting folks other than just the driver. So it's something that it's not just us coming up with it. It's something that's done in other states where there's data collection.
I'm not seeing any more questions. We'll move on to the next item. It's an update from the Criminal Justice Coordinator. Katie.
Thank you, Pam. So I just had a few things that I wanted to share. So we've talked several times about a survey, sending out a survey to the CJCC folks to get feedback to start the process for developing the 2023 kind of work plans or areas of focus for the CJCC. That's in the final stages of review at this point. So IT developed a web-based form to collect data, and we are finalizing the review of that and hope to have that out by the end of this week, hopefully. The survey is anonymous, so it doesn't ask name or any information. It's asks status. So if you're a current CJCC member, if you're a past CJCC member, or if you're just a community member or staff of any of our member agencies. So it's not tied to, like, I won't be able to tell whose feedback is what. So I want to share that. So when we send that out, this is kind of the first stage of gathering feedback about those issues that that folks feel are important, to help launch into developing the next kind of strategic plan for this group. So I will send that out in email once we have that link situated. So I would encourage you all to watch for that later this week. We are still kind of working through the process of finalizing a process that can result in a more consistent review of the jail population. There, as we've mentioned before, there's kind of a heavy data lift with that. And after some of our last discussions, there's challenges that we need to work through around being able to consistently engage the defense bar, particularly for felony cases, for them to be able to help initiate reviews with the court. And so we are still working through that process and kind of finalizing something that is consistent and effective for the reviewing the pretrial in custody population. And so as more of that comes together, we'll be sure to share that, but just want to make sure it has not fallen off of our radar. I did want to ask, in the November meeting, we discussed canceling the December CJCC meeting that we have scheduled for December 13th. However, as some folks on here know, Vera, the county had engaged with Vera, or the CJCC had been working with Vera over the last several years. Vera had been doing a analysis of the jail population and developing recommendations and looking at a lot of data and drivers of the jail population. And they have completed that report and have wanted to present that to the CJCC. And so I wanted to check with folks to see if people are still available and would like to have that at the December 13th meeting. I have one head nod. Kind of, if folks are available still, it should still be held on people's calendars. I didn't actually cancel the meeting invitation yet, but I just want to be sure that folks would actually want to have that in December, since we did discuss last month about canceling that. So I have Marielle, who is good. Sarah.
You want us to raise hands?
Kind of, I feel like I just want to, I would feel better having a consensus.
But we can raise our hands up. Yeah.
So a lot of folks, okay. I feel like that looks like the majority. So if folks are okay with that, then I will work with them to get them on the calendar for that meeting. That would be probably the only agenda item, is having them present and go through that report. And they will, I know several of our kind of key stakeholders, the report is embargoed until they present that publicly. Some of our key court officials, I will be working with, if they're interested in setting up meetings with Vera to help them walk through some of those recommendations and data. And Suzanne and the Sheriff's Office for sure right now are two of those. So if folks are okay with that, I will leave that on everyone's calendar for December 13th, and we will just plan to have that as the agenda. And depending on their recommendations and how folks feel about some of those, that could be a good kind of springboard into thinking about, as we start looking at planning, where is there momentum, or where is there a lot of consensus around work that we might want to engage in over the next year. So that may be helpful there. So that, and then the last item that I had was our county IT department has been working to update the county's website and the various pages on our website. And I've been working with them to update the CJCC page. We will be over the next several weeks transitioning kind of away from the hub and really wanting to utilize the CJCC page of the county's website. And the shortened version of that is dgcoks.org/CJCC. And I will send that out to folks, but I wanted to show, and this actually is going to segue into the next agenda item. So I wanted to show you all, can you all see that? Okay, so this is kind of what our new landing page will be. A lot of the information, we basically just transferred a lot of the information from the hub to this new site, or to the updated page. I wanted to just point out a few things, a few changes, or where folks can find information. This list right here, this link will bring up a list of all of the previously recorded CJCC meetings, any of the community meetings that have been had. This is just a kind of a quick link to the CJCC section of our YouTube, the county's YouTube channel. So you can find all of that here. This meetings tab will bring up information, all of the past meetings, and then the upcoming meeting, all of the meeting documents, so agendas, and if there were any slideshows or handouts, any materials from meetings will be attached in these links as well. And then the agendas for like the future meetings would be attached here also. And then the weekly stats page are all here. So the weekly stats that Matt calculates and sends out every week to folks will be posted on this website, or on this tab of the weekly stats tab. And there, I think Matt has done over 120 of these since his time here, and that can get kind of overwhelming here. So what we're going to be posting is kind of the rolling most recent 4 to 6 weeks here, and then archiving. This was the very first weekly stats report that Matt did in 2020, and then the last one in every June and every January since then will be archived. Just because a report is not here does not mean we don't still have it. So if there is a report that for some reason you're interested in that has not already been archived here, or is not in the last 4 to 6 weeks, you can just let me or Matt know, or send Matt an email. We have them. We just, for kind of visual sake and space sake, just didn't want to keep all of them posted here. So, so those are some of the big changes that I just wanted to highlight. And I want to segue into, those were all the updates that I had. And I know Matt is up next, and I wanted him to share with you guys some of the changes that he's made to the weekly stats. page. So Matt, if you want to kind of walk through, if you walk through the one that you did last week, for folks, I can leave it up for you to talk through.
Thanks, Katie.
Is it big enough?
Back and bring up the November 4th one.
Oh, November 4th, sorry. They'll be posted in date order too. That's one of the changes that we're working on. Sorry about that.
No problem. So about 2.5 weeks ago, we added some new material to the jail population section of the weekly stats report. And so you'll see a few new numbers there that I just want to draw everyone's attention to. Like before, we show the total in custody population. It was 190 on Friday the 4th. It shows the demographic breakdown by gender, race, and ethnicity, the in custody population by county of residence, the Douglas County resident population, not Douglas County resident population, and then people with the missing zip code who are typically homeless in Douglas County. And then, like before, we showed the in custody population housed in other county jails. That was 19. But now the report also shows the population at inpatient psychiatric and drug treatment facilities. So these people are still in the sheriff's office custody, but they're being held at other facilities for treatment. That was 15 people on Friday. The remaining population after taking out the people in other county jails and in treatment is the population physically in the jail. That was 156 on Friday. And then we also added a figure that shows the population over time. So the figure to the right shows the total number in custody and physically in the jail. It starts in January of 2022. As you can see, both numbers have increased steadily throughout 2022. They both rose about 30% since January. And then finally, at the very bottom of the jail section now, we're showing the number of people awaiting a bed at Larned State Psychiatric Facility for competency restoration. That number is 6. For a lot of October, it was about 9. So the people waiting Larned beds can typically wait about 8 to 12 months. And that's it for the new information. Any questions? I see one with Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just curious on that, one of the things we're trying to understand better is related to people who are going through the competency restoration process. So my question on the population at inpatient psychiatric and drug treatment facilities, is there a way to split that? Because I'm assuming that some of those individuals are at Larned going through restoration. Is that the right assumption or not?
Yes, some of them are at Larned and some of them are at other inpatient drug facilities.
So is there some way to indicate like what the totality of people who are under the sheriff's custody for competency restoration looks like as we follow that? That might not be helpful, but I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, we could break that number out. We just wanted to kind of have some brevity on this section too. And, we could list the number at Larned specifically and then at inpatient drug treatment facilities too. If there's consensus around that and people want that number broken out specifically, we can certainly add that.
It just seems like different processes to me.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Matt, this is Pam. I didn't have a question about that, but would it be possible for us to update the pretrial numbers weekly? Those change pretty dramatically as compared to the specialty courts. So we have a better comparison, how many folks are being released to pretrial supervision versus how many people sit in jail. Because if giving it monthly doesn't tell you really how much it's fluctuating.
Yeah, do you want to scroll down just a little bit, Katie, so people can see the pretrial section? So the pretrial section has the total number of supervisions as the current population. It also has the first appearances and then the outcomes if people were monitored successfully or if there was a new charge or something like that. So Pam, that's certainly possible to do. It's just a little bit more labor intensive to do it every week. And the other issue is just if you're showing every week, there's just so many bumps up and down for weeks. So like instead of showing October here, I guess we could show just the last week, but those numbers jump up and down. And sometimes, people end successfully, some people don't. And I just wonder how much demand there is for a weekly number. I mean, certainly, I think we could do that if you want, or we could just send you the version each week. But I'm happy to do it for the public version too, if people really want that. So it's just, there's pros and there's cons of both sides. I'm happy to do it either way.
I think I just want people to understand how heavily used the pretrial supervision is. I mean, that's the concern, is that weekly actually daily it changes who's on that status. And I don't know if that's important to anybody but me, since I'm supervising that group.
Well, we can continue that conversation. Oh, DA Valdez.
We're not hearing you for some reason.
Like with the list, especially the ones that need to figure out, like, can we figure out where they are?
Still muted.
Get this, make that move along, or is it something that we can just ask?
Not working. Okay. Well, we'll touch base about it later and see if we can all come to consensus about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that sounds good, Pam. I would just also say, if it's easy for you to do it, then I think it could be updated more frequently, but without a strong reaction from the group, maybe it's not. Just let's figure out what's easiest. I think the current population number of 184 tells me quite a bit, but so whatever you guys think you can get through easily. I just think having this data available weekly is really helpful.
Yeah, sounds good. Do we have any other questions? Seeing none.
Back to Bob's question about splitting out inpatient psychiatric and drug treatment. I guess what I wasn't clear, Matt, is you have both, you can do that, you can break it out.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think that might be helpful then, because then you could take the psychiatric number and add that to the awaiting beds at Larned, and we would have a better sense of competency. So I think if we could maybe ask for that one more number, I think that might be a good idea. And as we're trying to really address issues of competency.
Well, the one thing that he's trying to point out is those 15 people are on the list of being in jail, but they're not actually at the jail. And so
Right.
you can add them to the 6 because those 6 are actually in the jail.
Well, but what I guess, Pam, what I'm saying is that some of those people of the 15 are at Larned, from what I understand.
Right.
So that gets us to the competency question. How many
Right.
people are trying or are getting competent or awaiting competency? So, but that is different than somebody who's in drug treatment.
Correct.
So trying to be able to have that level of distinction might be helpful for folks.
Mhm.
And then you would add who's at inpatient psychiatric to the awaiting Larned. And it gives you a sense of the total sense of what we're trying to do to establish competency. Some waiting, some getting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Do you have any other thoughts or comments or questions? The next item I had on the agenda was the jail population update, but I don't see the sheriff.
Katie, can you stop sharing screen, please?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know that we have the sheriff here for that update.
All right. We'll move on. Do we have any public comment today? Zan, do you see anybody?
No one at this time.
Well, it looks like we were able to get through the agenda pretty quickly, so we're going to be able to give everybody some time back. So we'll meet again on December 13th for the review of the Vera study. Do we have any other things for the good of the order today? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn today's meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending.